Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Sahara Omar. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist practicing here in the state of Texas. I hope you guys are doing well. In today's video, I wanted to talk more about the 4 different types of trauma responses that are existing in us and how do we recognize if we are stuck in one, and what can you do to work towards getting out of those trauma responses. So in psychology, we recognize there's 4 different types of trauma responses. Think of trauma responses as ways that our body and our psyche reacting to a potential threat or threat that at one point existed. Those of us that experience a lot of trauma is pain, right? The brain is naturally going to interpret that as a threat. So how we are surviving that threat, right? Sometimes we're going to fight that possible threat. Sometimes we're going to run away from it. Sometimes we're going to freeze and pretend we are dead until the possible threat is kind of passed by. And other times we can just fawn and give in to that potential threat so that way we don't get attacked. So I always remind my clients, it doesn't matter how we survived, as long as we are proud of ourselves that we did survive, and now we have the potential opportunity to not continue to survive and come out of that survival mode. So when people also talk about survival mode, they're talking about these 4 different type of trauma responses that we can get stuck in. And that's the fascinating part about the human brain. It cannot tell the difference between potential threat and current threat and past threats. The brain just perceives all timeline as the same, unfortunately. So we need cognition, we need awareness to help us recognize, oh, this happened in the past, it's not happening now, and we can come out of it, okay? So the first one I want to kind of discuss with you guys is going to be the fight response. When we are experiencing that fight response, or we are in this fight response, typically we're going to show up a little bit more rage-oriented, very angry, a lot more like willing to harass people, bully people, more intimidation, more stalking tendencies as well too. The brain just sees itself as like, I have to defend myself because no one ever defended me and no one ever cares about me, so why should I care? So if you're finding yourself a little bit more angry, usually, like I mentioned before to you guys in previous videos, people who are stuck in a fight response don't come out to mental health care usually on their own. Something else usually happens that forces them to come to therapy. And the challenge is to not make that a normal way of existing. If you are recognizing, yeah, I'm stuck in a fight response, definitely go to therapy, get some help so that way you can come out of the angry space that your brain is familiar with. And then the second one is called a flee response. Flee response, typically, if you're stuck in that space, you're a little bit more panicky, a little bit more worried, scared. The fear of that threat that you experienced is super dominant in the brain. A lot more rumination. Rumination is when we rehearse and think through possible outcomes and things that we experience and how we should respond to certain people. So when we are ruminating, we live in our brain a lot. So, and people who are stuck in a flee response are constantly fixing things. They look for answers all the time. They are literally like on a go, go, go mode all the time. They don't know how to rest and slow down. They also do have perfectionism tendencies too, like cleaning a little bit more, like I said earlier, or organizing a little bit more, just constantly having to do something. Sitting down and resting, just the brain does not understand that response. So people in a flee response typically have a lot more that they juggle. They tend to be sometimes workaholics, picking up multiple projects over and over again, just not knowing how to kind of say no to things and slowing down and learning how to find that balance within themselves. And then the third one is called the freeze response. If we're stuck in a freeze response, we typically a little bit more disconnected from reality. A lot more dissociation. Dissociation is an extreme form of zoning out. We all do zone out. We all do think through like the days ahead and things that we would like to accomplish. So there is a normal level of zoning out that happens, but frequent zoning out becomes something called dissociation. Dissociation is when you skip all reality altogether because of that possible threat that you experienced growing up or previous life experiences that you had where you felt like threatened and not safe. So dissociation, literally, there's extreme versions of it. We call it derealization, depersonalization, where the body just kind of, the brain and the soul body kind of skips over reality altogether, and we go into a space where we watch ourselves living life, and that's an extreme version of zoning out. Sometimes people would feel like numbing. There's this sense of like numbness that happens internally. Ways that we combat those numbness when we're stuck in the freeze response is like watching a little bit more technology, playing more video games, and binge watching a full show in one setting. Doing things that just kind of like skipping over your normal routine and things that you need to know you're supposed to be doing, kind of avoiding all of that altogether. Sometimes people who are stuck in the freeze response, the common word that I hear is, I feel stuck. I feel stuck in life, or I feel stuck in myself. Sometimes people describe like not having any excitement about life, and just almost like just extreme disconnection, essentially, right? Like they're not connected to their body, because that's where the threat was happening, right? Like the body was the one that's gotten threatened, essentially. And then the last one is fawn response. When we're stuck in a fawn response, we have no boundaries typically. We say yes a lot more codependency. I'll make a video on what codependency is in the future. Codependency is an extreme, heavy reliance on someone else. It's literally us saying, I don't know how to think, feel, or do without somebody else's approval or somebody else's recognition. So when we're codependent with people, we tend to kind of forget about ourselves and what we think and value and want. So we try to prioritize other people. A lot of people-pleasing tendencies, not knowing how to make decisions for ourselves, not knowing how to stand up for ourselves. And then a lot more identity loss as well too, not knowing who we are, what do we believe in, what do we think, and what we want for ourselves. Think of fawning as like we're giving into the threat. So it is a way to survive the chaos and the pain and the trauma. But as we get older as adults, that does not serve us anymore, and it is our job to learn how to come out of these states. Okay, so similar to what I shared with you guys previously, to come out of any of these trauma responses, I highly recommend getting into therapy and working with a therapist that works well with you, because you do want to understand what are those possible threats that pushed you to be in those spaces, and also make sense of that story, right? So not only know where it comes from, but also holding people accountable and processing some of those traumas internally. And slowly, you will learn also in therapy ways that you can come out of these spaces, right? So if you're a fight response, you have to ask yourself, why do I have to be always angry, right? What's an alternative way to anger? What's behind the anger? And typically it's going to be a little bit more sadness, and allowing yourself to feel that sadness, so that way you're not stuck in that angry mode all the time. If we're stuck in a flee response, we need to learn how to slow down and prioritize, like, for example, resting and doing nothing at times, right? And it doesn't have to be like doing nothing for days at a time. That's an extreme form of pushing ourselves to rest to that level. Sometimes we do need a vacation and time off. Finding small moments throughout the day where you're just doing nothing, and appreciating how life can be slow at times as well. Okay. And then for the freeze response, if we're stuck in a freeze response, learning how to motivate ourselves a little bit and not relying on external motivation, figure out ways to be internally motivated, trusting your body again, creating routine, creating structure, so that way you can learn how to be disciplined and get things done. If you're noticing, like, the freeze response is literally the opposite of flee response, and the fight response is the opposite of a fawn response, right? So a flee person needs to learn how to slow down. A freeze person needs to learn how to go a little bit. A fight person needs to learn how to slow down and be a little bit more kinder to people. A fawn person needs to learn how to stand up and set their boundaries and be a little bit more strong with their desires and needs with other people as well too. And if we're stuck in that fawn, that's what we recommend usually, right? Like learning how to set those boundaries, not being codependent, stopping people-pleasing tendencies, trusting yourself, and asking yourself who you are at the core. That's how we come out of these 4 different responses. So I highly recommend first get into therapy, start talking about some of these responses and realizing also which one are you predominantly finding yourself stuck in. I do want to add, all of us can find ourselves stuck in any of those. It just depends on the threat, right? The level of threat that is in front of us. And we all have all four internally. So it's just more of recognizing which one is dominant, which one do you tend to flow for your own psyche, and see if you can learn other ways that you can come out of it as well. Okay? I hope you guys liked the video. Feel free to hit that thumbs up. Also, feel free to leave a comment and share this video with other people. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.